right there. I don't really think you guys are listening closely enough because this moment is actually major. What you are hearing right now is the world premiere of the brand new Viva la Renaissance theme song. That is right. Season 2 comes with a whole new crew working behind the scenes to bring you all the stories of artists who have walked their unconventional path in pursuit of their dreams. And I want to call attention right now to Frederick Lewis, my new sound designer, who happens to be a kick-ass musician, DJ, and teacher living out in Denver. And he came up with this theme song. Okay, let's get back to it. Hello, lovers! Today is Valentine's Day, and I am pouring my heart into delivering this episode to you, doing everything I can to get it out today. And I actually, I love Valentine's Day, of course. I'm a big romantic, and I actually got all my Valentines in the mail last week to the Art by Mail Club, which was possibly the single greatest piece of ephemera I've ever designed. I really put a lot into a very clever Valentine design this year, which is very interactive and dirty and fun. And it's just, ephemera. That's what it is. I love that word. And you guys know what that is? You know, this seems like a good opportunity, actually, to whip out my big, fat dictionary. And let's go down a little ephemera rabbit hole. So it's Greek, obviously. It's from the word ephemeros, meaning for the day or short-lived. And this is also a genus of insect that includes mayflies and dayflies, insects that die, are born and die within the same day. So it means anything having a very short shelf life, which is why the term is used for disposable paper things like I like to make, like postcards, ads, tickets, programs, paper things mostly get called ephemera. And also worth reading here is the definition of ephemeral, which is diurnal, beginning and ending in a day. That's like the bugs we were talking about. Short-lived, transitory, as in ephemeral glory. You would hope glory would last longer, but you never know. You don't get to decide, right? And anything that has but a brief existence, as certain insects, plants, etc. Synonyms include transient, evanescent, fleeting, fugitive, momentary. So anyway, I was telling you how I made some really good ephemera last week. Possibly the greatest Valentine that has ever been made in all humanity. That's not for me to say, but I was pretty proud of myself about it. And if that's not reason to join my Art by Mail Club, I really don't know what is. Honestly, it's like some of my best work is coming out of it. And if you're missing it, I'm not going to be doing it forever because it's a world-class pain in the ass. I'm definitely committed to doing it for another year, but it is really fun. And I am turning out a lot of good work. So consider signing up. It's on the website. Anyway, I am so excited for this interview. We are starting season 2 out with the meat, not the crust, not a little appetizer. Oh, no. This is a big meaty dish. And it is not only one of my dearest friends in the world, but he is a man that you will be glad to know. He has written a page-turning, gut-wrenching memoir about working in an oil field in North Dakota. And the experience of reading and sitting with his words for the past few weeks have just taken me down this whole journey of processing many painful and confusing events of my own family history. It's been, just one of those gifts. Without giving too much away, I'll save it for the conversation. But the book involves, him retelling a lot of traumatic childhood memories that required my friend Mike to consult with all of his siblings, kind of to both reconstruct the events, but also to get their permission and approval for how he was telling their side of the story. And he dedicates the book to them. And, they're very much alive in the memoir. And that just really gave me so much to ponder. I've just been thinking so deeply about it. And as some of you know, who are close to me, about 3 months ago, my father received a liver transplant courtesy of my youngest sister, who donated 60% of her liver to my dad, which is, really just a miracle of science. It's really crazy to me. I mean, this is an operation that took place at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. And my sister, who is 17 years younger than me, she's the offspring of my dad's and his third partnership. So my dad actually partnered with 3 different women during his life. I was the only child of him and my mom, who were 20 when they got married and had to have my grandmother sign for them on their marriage certificate to give them approval. And not surprisingly, they divorced when I was 5. And my dad then went on to partner with another woman with whom he had 2 surprise children in the middle of a messy growth phase of his that involved a bunch of career changes too. And then when I was in 5th grade, my dad met his third partner in the longest, healthiest, and current partnership that he is in, lasting 35 years and counting, with my stepmother, who I lived with the 2 of them from 7th grade through high school. So when my dad first told me that he had liver cancer, and he was treating it with chemo, but that he was on a list for a liver donation, I mean, I was, really stunned and concerned. And, I had many feelings about it. But one thing I didn't consider was actually donating my liver to my father, partly because I didn't know it was possible, at the time. But also, I am 46. I worked in nightlife in New York City for a decade, and I don't think my liver would actually help him out much anyway. But I did spend many weeks, just wondering if why I didn't consider donating my liver. Or, what was going on there? Was I being selfish? Was my sister just a better daughter? Did she have a better childhood? Is she just younger? Was it like a practical reason I didn't think of it? Or, what was so different about my relationship with my dad than my sister's relationship with him? And, and what about the middle kids? And those kids who haven't even spoken to my dad in years, those middle siblings I have, they only even know about the condition of our father because I update them. So, what happened to the rest of us? I think about this part of the story, from many, many sides. And many of my friends are wrestling with the mortality of their parents, which is a whole rite of passage of midlife. And one of the impacts of reading Mike's book, which, by the way, is called The Good Hand and comes out February 16th. So you can either pre-order it today or just get it as soon as you can. So yeah, there, that saying that we don't get to choose our families, but maybe we do, if you read a lot or listen to a lot of survivors of near-death experiences, many of them recount being shown the events of their lives and basically being made aware that they did choose their experience. The whole messy thing of it, that because no one gets an easy lot of it, it's a little bit like, pick your poison. It's all going to hurt. How do you want it to hurt? And it's just an interesting, thing to think about. Whether you're born into a poor family or a rich one, historically enslaved family or a historically colonizing family, both are fraught with struggle. There is no one that gets out of this alive. So, life is a one-way ticket and we don't get to take anything with us when we go. So, it's a struggle for everyone. Which struggle you get, it is kind of random. But what if it isn't? What if we did choose this? What if our soul chose this experience because of the ways in which we need to grow? So, yeah. I mean, this messy experience, it comes with a lot of pain, a lot of confusion. But, as time has unraveled, I've experienced what love from my father looks like across decades now. What closeness and distance looks like. I know what it looks like to, look at my childhood and leave home seeking so much more of the world, making chosen families, none of which have stood the test of time the way my actual family has. And, this was tested by my divorce, by my exile from my creative community in New York, and by my struggle to just keep the flame of my dream lit out here on the West Coast when most people have been telling me to give up. That's like a very, I'm not going to say universal, but I would say 90% of the people in my life, many of whom had stopped talking to me because even my pursuit of my dream seems like madness to them. And, my passions, my madness, that is part of the package. And, my father has actually accepted me for that. All the messy parts of me, we're still hanging in. And so, yeah, just looking at my messy, broken family and how they've become really the foundation of my heart now, I'm really grateful for that. But, this mutual acceptance of our messiness, it took a long time. It took a lot of self-reflection on my own weaknesses. I can give my dad a lot more credit for doing the best that he can now that I'm a little bit older, because I see how complex every decision can be. I've looked at, my weaknesses, my fears to get to compassion. And now I can have it for many others. So, for example, someone that's come up a lot this week is Woody Allen, and who is accused of abusing his children, which should go without saying with me. Any crime against a child is one of the few true crimes against humanity that I can think of. And this accusation has caused many people to ban or boycott his movies. And I just want to offer another opportunity and a perspective related to that, and related to thinking about the full spectrum of love and family love in particular. So, and if this is not to validate any bad behavior or criminal behavior, I want to say that some of these accusations are crimes. But I just want to consider the complexity of a person. And this idea might be advanced for some of you. So if you're not there yet, I get it. It took me a while to get there too. But, if any one of my siblings were to write the definitive book on my father, which version of the story would be true? Would it be my version, where I grew up with an angry, young, and impulsive man who at 20 married his high school sweetheart and was working as a mechanic? Is that the story? Or is the story of my middle siblings who had to grow up without a father because they were the product of really some 80s excessive partying and maybe a rebound, and really a man who also didn't know himself very well and who paid a price for that? Or would it be the story of my youngest sister, who grew up with both of her parents, was part of a church and a community that I never met, and this sister who was so distraught over the news of my dad's liver cancer that she personally cut out her own guts to give to him. And then each of our mothers could write their own books about the same man as well. So when I look at the sort of complicated experience of many sides of my father, I have to extend that compassion to every human being. And I know we all come here with a wound to heal. In astrology, that's indicated by where the placement of the asteroid Chiron is in your chart. And Chiron is the mythological character. It was a centaur who had never healed from a wound and thus became a wounded healer. And that usually points to our life wound. We all have one. We all have a central hurt that can cripple us if we don't learn how to deal with it. And things come out sideways in our avoidance of dealing with it a lot of times. So, sometimes that wound comes out, from the abuse or neglect or the constriction that was put upon us. And we have to heal that. That's the work of life. That's just how it is for everybody. So I can separate whatever opinion I have of the family experience of the man Woody Allen from the influence of the creativity and the output, the work of a man, an artist. So, holding that complexity, I think, is something that I learned from Woody Allen, actually, is to really look at just how complicated human relationships and behavior are. So many good lessons have come from him. And I believe artistic legacies are important to acknowledge, as important as blood. We don't get to choose our fathers, and we don't really get to choose our heroes necessarily either. The artists that are able to rise up through culture and all the things they have to push through to get into that strata of our imagination and to bring us all that work, that's a miracle, It's like I think of Michael Jackson too, who's accused of similar things, and I'll never stop listening to his music. It is inseparable from who I am, who I grew up as. To deny his influence is to deny a part of myself, truly. I was in 3rd and 4th grade when Thriller was all over everything. It was everything, So I'll always be grateful for that. And, I do believe that artists are messengers, that their work transcends them. It comes from a place beyond them. We receive this, from spirit. And if one person doesn't receive it, someone else will. It's going to come out, some way. So, yeah, any gift of spirit is one that I treasure. And as a mature woman now, I can hold space for the complex idea that Michael Jackson or Woody Allen are capable of committing a deep betrayal and crime against someone, as capable as they are of creating some of the greatest work of all time, of our generation. So, and Thriller is the artistic child of Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones together. I mean, I would never take someone's child to trial for the crimes of the parent. It's just how I feel about the art and the work of these people. So the work kind of gets a pardon from me because it's kind of not its fault. But of course, we can't unsee or unhear difficult things, and everyone has to work through this in their own way. I understand that. But when I catch a Michael Jackson song, I am transported back to my childhood, and I think about a lot. The true cost of fame is actually what I think about. And how we like to put people on pedestals and completely destroy them and make them hate themselves even. I wonder about truth and family and abuse and many, many things. And yet I still love his music and I sing along with all my heart. So, more than one thing can be true at the same time. Many experiences go into shaping what should ultimately, be a really, really complex picture of a whole person. So for Valentine's Day, the thing I want to give you the most is just permission to love what you love because you love it. And as long as it's legal and not hurting anyone or taking anything from anyone, just embrace what you love in all of its complexity. And that includes Woody Allen and Michael Jackson. If they were influential to you and you feel like you need a little injection of your deepest roots and stuff, I mean, they were part of mine, like it or not. They were part of what formed me as an artist, just like my father. So that is what it is. And I'm not going to reject that because I think we have to accept all of ourselves, all the complexity. And, even the hardest family secrets can be transformed with time and light. And that is what my next guest is here to talk about. Some stories just have longer timelines, and we don't have to jump to quick conclusions. We don't have to burn down our idols, and we don't have to destroy the messengers, because everyone pays a high price for life. Even people who seem to have it easy. Nothing is easy, and no freedom comes without a price. It's immaturity to believe otherwise. So there is a hero or artist that you have shelved for, I'm using air quotes here, problematic behavior. I really invite you to dust that relationship off again, to make your own conclusions and let them be complicated. There are not easy answers. I invite you to look at some of your old loves, your old love affairs with the eyes of the wise, not the reactivity of a child. You don't have to have a final judgment on their moral character, because you are not a jury of angels weighing on the value of a person's contribution to humanity. I really can't imagine what authority we would have to be able to judge, if a person is good or bad in their life. So this is my gift. Permission to love what you love because you love it, whatever it is. Don't let your mind make all the decisions for your heart. There are many ways to see the world. Let it be complicated. Just let yourself steep in the music, movies, art, and ideas that you love. And that's reason enough. So, having said all that, I'm going to shut up now because this is plenty of conversation coming up next, and you're going to love it. Make sure you go and buy the book. It's called The Good Hand. Enjoy.
Vive la Renaissance listeners, today is really exciting for me because this guest is about to release his first book, and it is a page-turner of a biography, and it tells the tale of a year that he spent working on an oil field in North Dakota, which is a thankless, dangerous job that introduced him to a whole cast of completely flawed and lovable characters, all breaking their bodies and spirits for 14 hours a day and punishing brutal weather, where deaths of coworkers are common, either from the dangers of the job itself or from the drugs, booze, and violence that are abused as a result of working such insane conditions, and all in the pursuit of oil, which, we come to learn has a way more of a chokehold on us than we even realize by virtue of this utterly ubiquitous petroleum that is just in everything, and that part of the book might keep you up at night. I'm not going to lie. I read this book in 8 days, and I would have gotten through it faster because I felt like I was practically inhaling it, but I had to slow down because I got 4 good cries out of it and spent hours and hours with my own journal processing years of my own family history because of it. So it really hit me in the heart and in the gut. And you should not be deterred by that because we are in such good, capable hands. This man is such a great writer. He has navigated us through some American frontier history, teaching us new vocabulary words and local customs. He gives us a macro and micro look at the true price of oil, which I don't think any of us have really done the math on. And while he was doing this, he pushed his own self to the limits, just seeking peace in his heart. And this required gently untangling skeletons from the closets of his own family, writing and living his hero's journey at the same time, channeling all of his heroes from Samuel Beckett to Woody Guthrie, anchored in wisdom of folk music, and really doing what artists do best, which I guess in the most raw sense is hurling themselves into life, like the ocean hurling itself at the shore, making your life and your work completely inseparable. This is what I keep yammering on about on this podcast. This is living a mytho-poetic life with grit. And this man has told his story with some real cut-to-the-bone honesty that just makes me love and respect him even more. And this man is someone I have considered a fellow artist on the path for at least 20 years now. And I want you all to clap real loud at home, stomp your feet, get your dog howling and your cats meowing for the first guest of season 2, the author of the brand new great American book titled The Good Hand, please welcome my friend, Michael Patrick Flanagan Smith.
That's quite the introduction. Thanks, Trixie.
You can tell how nervous and excited I am because we spent an hour at least on the tech problems and doing this episode, and we're wading through Mercury retrograde. So thank you, Mike, for being here. Is it okay if I call you the familiar Mike? I know that to the rest of the world you have to be Michael now.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I'm okay with either or. I'm not gonna fight. I'm not gonna fight anybody over that syllable.
So I am like gushing for this because I'm so proud of you, because I've been kind of, just really watching you struggle to write this for so many years now. And the fact that it came out and it's so beautiful and well crafted and thoughtful, and like literally it just made me weep, because I know you, and also because you speak so much truth, and it's just so poignant. So I just really want to thank you for persevering. A friend of mine, he calls me a finisher, and he's like, as he says, that's why he likes working with me, is because I finish things. And I want to pass that along to you, because my whole time of knowing you are also someone who actually finishes things, and that's really rare.
Yeah, it is. It's the big challenge, right?
So start there. So start with how it feels to have completed this big creative baby, getting it out into the world.
Yeah, it feels incredible, and I'm still, waiting honestly to feel what it's like. So it's just coming out now, and so it's kind of like waiting to see how I feel, and after a little time has passed, and it's been great that some people have read it, but you're one of the few people at this point that have read it, and so.
That's true. It's not actually out until the 16th. Yeah.
So, but somebody asked me, the finisher thing is really interesting. Somebody just asked me, actually about that, or if I had any advice on it, I guess. And I guess what I always find with a project, whatever I work on, whether it's like a play or this book, which is the biggest project that I've done in my life. But, I always kind of ask myself, like, and it's mostly a subconscious thing, but before I even embark on a project, I really think about like what I want the project to do. Not just in the terms of personal, how I want it to help me personally, because those are kind of obvious and intrinsic. Like I want it to make me popular. I want, people to be impressed by me. I want to do things that cause friends to gather and cause people to gather. So all that stuff seems really obvious, and it's obviously a part of it. But for me, it's what makes the finishing happening is the project itself. It's the desire to serve the project itself. So I always find it's important to start with like a high ideal. And by that, I can even be like, look, I think theater is beautiful. I think theater is amazing. I think just its existence brings people together, and that it helps us understand and contemplate, and consider our lives. So just putting on a play because I think it's funny, can fall into that category. With this book, I had more lofty kind of goals in that I felt like, there's these group of people, who I knew and had become close to and grew to love. And, I wasn't reading anything else that was really honoring them and showing kind of the sacrifices and the dignity of a certain type of American and a certain type of work that, I feel like gets demonized a little bit or mostly just ignored. And so the goal was really to like shine a light on these folks, and that having that goal, and whether it's a little bit delusional or not, it's like, having that goal, I think puts me in the position where I am what I want to be, which is, the messenger. And, a messenger, you're giving them, the goal is the message. It's like, sure, by the time you get to court, you want the king to think you're cool. Maybe there's a damsel there, but But the reality is that the important part is delivering the message. And when you're going through rocky terrain and as time passes and as all the personal reasons for doing a project, for doing an artistic endeavor, they disappear, man, depending on, how many cups of coffee you've had on any given day. So keeping the eye on the message is the thing that I think has kind of been the key for me to just get things done. I want to get them done for the thing itself.
That's really interesting. I feel that in so many ways. I had this big problem. I had many big problems with burlesque, but one of the problems with that particular artistic community was that I felt like it had sort of lost that right. It had sort of become a sort of self-serving community where people wanted to feel good from performing, and I was like, I rarely feel good because I'm in service to my art. It's not about me feeling good. Right. It's about me doing a bigger job. And usually it's about me working out how it needs to be delivered for people to receive it. It's an act of service. Yeah. People don't understand what artists are. They don't understand what we do. That's why we have this podcast, Mike. That's why you're here.
Well, I think the act of service is absolutely at the cornerstone of it. I mean, storytelling is older than farming. It's the most oldest human thing. It's that and fire, and I always feel that, and it gets corrupted. The same thing in kind of Hollywood is you get, which is just now, I'm generalizing, but it's just, a lot of rich kids, who grew, his parents are costume designers and they met everybody and they're named Chris and they all go to the same acting teacher. And then it's just the casting directors picks a Chris and puts the fucking guy, the relatively handsome guy because his parents were, attractive LA people. It's they end up getting the roles. Whereas I think that they're, it's just so that kind of makes that business just pretty fucking unappealing, much less appealing to me than when you had men like Lee Marvin or Charles Bronson or these guys who had lived lives and had fucking fought at Iwo Jima or whatever. And it's give them that guy with a gun. I believe that guy with a gun. These fucking gym rats who just kind of like themselves. It's I believe you've learned martial arts in a gym. And, you're going to be able to pull these stunts off and God bless you. But it's a little bit of a side rant.
So when did it become clear to you, when did it become clear what the message was that needed to be said with this project? Because it came from such a natural impulse in your life, this sort of the way you describe it in your book, that you sort of got this high from doing this sort of real physical work because of Hurricane Sandy in the Rockaway Beach in New York, and that sort of gave you this sort of bolstered confidence about just how much you could take on, right. and so you sort of personally set out to sort of prove something to yourself. So when did the message that needed to come through with the book, when did that start to become clear?
I think it was right at the beginning. So when I left New York to move to North Dakota, I did tell some friends that I was writing a book, and it's one of those things where I'm going out there to write a book, where my own motivations were a little bit of a mystery to me because they were much more gnarly than that, and I'd never written a fucking book. So saying you're going to write a book is real different than writing the book. And saying you're gonna, and when you have friends in a sort of progressive city environment and you tell them you're going to go work on oil rigs, I think it was a little bit of me bullshitting, a little bit of me bullshitting them, bullshitting myself. I wasn't so sure, but I had been reading about the oil boom. It was in the New York Times. It was in all of these big papers, and it still is a problem that, I think the majority of the reporting of this country, is coming from urban centers and people who, well-meaning people, but people who drop down in a town for a week or two, sit in a diner, ask a handful of questions to the people there, and then, deliver their story, to the rest of the world, as opposed to people who live in a place, know the people, can get real answers, can get under the questions. And so I felt an awareness of that when I went out there. And then when I started working in the oil field, it was such a shockingly different lifestyle. And that immediately feels normal, when you're in it. So, well, not exactly, but I was writing, I would write these long emails to a small group of friends and, just about what I was going through. And the reactions I was getting were just so were really powerful reactions. And
In what way?
And then I guess people were very surprised at the situation I found myself in. I drove out to get a job in the oil field. I didn't know anybody. I was in a town called Williston. Williston had, at one point, had about 12,000 people in it, about 2008, 2010. And by the time I was there, which was 2013, it had basically tripled. It was like 30,000 people. And the mayor said he thought it was 60,000 because they couldn't count the number of men that had moved into this town trying to get jobs. It was on the heels of the economic crash and on the destruction of construction in the country. And so there were all these primarily men who were out of work, who had moved there and were sleeping in their vehicles to a great extent, because it was so expensive to find housing. So it was this old time boom town experience. And then, I ended up moving I slept in my truck for a little while and then ended up moving into a flop house where I rented a mattress on a floor for, I think, $450.
Can you define what a flop house is for people that maybe don't know?
Yeah. It's kind of an old timey term because you don't hear about them very often, but, it was in this case, there's a townhouse and, the town, as I was describing, was flooded with migrants. So one important aspect to understand is that when I got to Williston, rent was higher than in Northwest North Dakota than it was in Williamsburg, New York, which I had come from. And
which seems insane.
Which is insane. It became the highest rent in the entire country. It beat out San Francisco while I was there. So, because there's such a shortage of housing. The shortage of housing also led to situations like the one I was in, which was that I rented a mattress on a floor. There were, anywhere between 3 and 5 other guys in the living room that I stayed in. The upstairs 3 bedrooms.
But where do you put your stuff? How do you organize your toothbrush? I don't even understand how you do that.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically right. It's like indoor camping, It's like
you're living on the floor.
You have your fucking bag with your toothbrush in it, and then and it's pretty gnarly in that place where there's guns in the house and there's drugs in the house. And, there are guys from Jamaica who were living there. There was a dude who was from Africa. Another guy who was originally from Minneapolis had come from the Philippines. And, as well as, a mother and son who'd been displaced by Katrina in Louisiana. And they'd barely, even all those years later, they were still basically on the run from economic, the economic impact of that. So right. It's just being in this house where everybody's bundled in and you're trying to get along and you're trying, not to fight anybody and, or not to let the racial tensions and the different cultural tensions boil over into something that's, real bad,
Totally. I mean, because you're just a bunch of strangers living together. It's hard to live with people I can't imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And the entire town was like that because, it had tripled or quadrupled in population. And it was mostly men with nothing to lose. You don't hop in your car and drive 1,000 miles if things are going great at home. And for women, it was a pretty terrifying experience. And most of them, a lot of the time, it was men with families left their families back where they lived and they came out there to work. But there were some women in the patch, but they were severely outnumbered and they were in a very, scary situation because of, the level of assaults and rapes and, which were also, it had the highest, the highest cases of one really bizarre thing that happened was because the oil field would hire workers with felonies, which I think is a positive thing. But they were also hiring sex offenders. And so sex offenders can't get jobs anywhere. And so Williston became the place with the highest level of sex offenders in the entire nation. And there was a lot of rumors and innuendo and fear around that. I was told constantly not to leave my drink alone by myself at the bar. And people were, always.
Which seems crazy for a guy to have to. I mean, women are always told that, but I mean, it's interesting that even assaults of men were common. That you said.
Yeah, it was really, it was really shocking to hear, and it gave me a lot of, as a man, you always hear women say that, and you think, okay, or you sympathize, or but like to actually be told that is really fucking startling.
Yeah. Well, and then, these people with all these, mental imbalances put in really extreme weather and work conditions without housing, without like all these things like you're saying, without proper support. It's, it's a tinderbox.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's just waiting.
For sure.
So part of the really endearing way in which you tell this story is you tell it a lot through all the characters that you meet, which I really love. I appreciated that so much. I mean, because each one is just such a beautiful, it's like, which thread do you want to pull on? Whose rabbit hole do you want to go down? Each of their lives are so interesting. Yeah. And you tell them with, you're so gentle about it. And I really love your writing. And would you just maybe give us a little bit of some of your favorite friends, how those stories turned out? And, I guess it's weird. I mean, I thought about your process a lot, like the process of trying to take people in the real world and with compassion and honesty, tell their story in relation to your own. It's such a tricky thing. And so some of the stories, I mean, obviously Huck was such a favorite of mine through the whole thing. I mean, he's such a big character in the whole book. But there's many others. So I just wanted to hear you tell some of your favorite stories about the people that sort of made the deepest impression on you, either in real life or through the retelling of it too. Yeah,
it's interesting because the retelling of it becomes kind of its own thing.
Totally.
One guy, the guy who owned the place I refer to as the Flop House, and I call him Champ in the book. He was like a real character. He was just a bare knuckle striver from the East Coast who was he had sort of felt like his friends had done well. He knew people who owned kind of construction businesses and had some success and bought houses. His life hadn't gone exactly how he'd wanted it to go. And his decision, he'd moved to Williston and then he bought the house. And he was just trying to pay the motherfucker off as fast as he could,
Yeah.
So he was just a real character and somebody that just was like such a prototypical kind of American figure. I mean, he was chasing the money. He had his plan. He was going to get it done. Yeah,
and he was really like pushing you guys around and like turning the screws, just like ratcheting up all the tension all the time. It sounded like,
he was funny and he liked to drink and he liked to mix it up and shit. So it made him like so I really liked him. I worry a little bit that he comes off badly in the book. And it's hard because, you have to write down what people do and what they say. And then also, like color it a little bit, but he, he was one. There was another. The biggest figures in the books were my friendships with a guy I call the Wildebeest, and then with Huck, who you mentioned. And those were, big ones. The Wildebeest is a guy who had grown up in company housing. So his father was a gin truck driver, and they worked in the oil patch. And this dude had grown up that way. I think he first drove a big rig when he was 12 or 13. and would work on the weekends, you know,
which is like terrifying, right? Because you talk about like your time learning to drive it and stuff.
Oh, it's
like
scary.
So imagining a boy of 12.
Yeah, you know. But he'd also been a bronc rider and had done like bull riding and stuff, and and just
compared to that.
Yeah, he was just tough as nails. But he, you know, one thing about him that I found really interesting was I felt like he really was a very gentle soul. He was incredibly hard on me, and he was real mean for a lot of the time, until we kind of made peace with each other. But I feel like he was an example of somebody who has an incredibly gentle soul, who was sort of born into circumstances that were real hard, and he became real hard, you know, as a result of it. I was really
surprised. Yeah, and you mentioned in your book, that he completely changed demeanor in the presence of his children.
Yeah.
Which is just so telling to me, you know, that he intentionally gave you a hard time. And I thought about that a lot because, you know, one of my complaints with sort of where culture has gotten to now as a result of helicopter parenting and technology addiction. And, you know, I joke all the time that we're the last generation that was allowed to fall out of trees, because I think that there's a lot of lessons that you have to learn that way.
Right.
And when children aren't allowed to go outside or make mistakes or fall down, and everyone's really avoiding any sort of pain or hardship, there's no growth, you know. So I've been thinking a lot about this, like how much, you know, sternness and constraint and restriction have worked for me better than a lot of coddling, you know, like,
right.
Like you will get there faster, and the lessons will sink in deeper.
Right.
You know, because we only learn through either desire or pain, in my experience. So it's not going to feel good necessarily while you're doing it, but when you get to the other side of it, like you credit him with turning you into a good hand finally.
Right.
That without his sort of mentorship, that you know, you might not have had that experience really. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but it's just I've been thinking a lot about that, like sort of his lessons and the sternness of a different generation, and whether that should be brought back and not let go a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, no, you know, it's like which parts of it were too hard and which parts of it were the right amount.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a good question, because, you know, there definitely is a balance. I mean, I guess the term toxic masculinity gets thrown around a lot these days, but there was definitely buckets of that in the oil field. And we were doing a job where you can get killed like pretty easily. So,
and he let some close calls, it seems like, happen to teach you those lessons, which sounds totally terrifying.
Yeah, he allowed some close calls to happen, and then he fucked up a couple times and almost knocked my head off.
Right.
So, which, you know, you learn then that, okay, well, even though this guy has been doing it for 20 years, people still make mistakes, and I got to be real careful, you know?
Totally.
But I think that there is definitely value in that. I think that there's in being a little tougher than sort of what you hear parents are doing these days.
Well, and out there, it's like the stakes are so high.
Right.
I mean, I was frustrated too, because a lot of times I would be like, why don't they just take the time to train these guys? But you know, I was like,
right. I too had that feeling.
Well, why not? What's your answer? Is it somewhere between pride, ego, inability to articulate, or is it work better?
I don't think it works better. As far as like, and I guess to clarify to listeners, there's no training in the oil. At my job in the oil field, there was no training. Basically, you start and then
sink or
men
swim.
Scream at you, and as long as you're willing to show up, the office will keep calling you. If you're really bad in the field, you'll get run off, which is essentially the guys in the field will make your life so hellish that you won't return. And that's really the
Right.
that's really the deciding factor. So it's like a sort of a tribal thing, and it's not uncommon, for guys to get in fistfights in the oil field. They'll walk off the site and hash it out.
Right.
And I don't think it's a very good way to run a business. But as to why it's like that, there's an element to it that's could be considered good, but in general, it would have been nice to have gotten some safety training. They stuck me in a basement and had me watch VHS videos for a few days, and then they said, "Okay, well, now you know what you're doing."
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Terrifying. So, how soon, a big part of the book that is so revelatory is really about you unpacking your own childhood and your own, I guess, abusive father. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
Yeah, sure.
a hard father that really loomed large over your whole family. And so the details and the way in which you're able to understand the father wound that you talk about so eloquently and recognize it in all of these other men. How did that come about? Like how long did you realize that was sort of the central like thorn in the side that was really at the heart of all this, what would you say? Just pain and hardship and violence. It's just very violent. The work is violent. It's scary.
Yeah. That's a great question. In Williston, so if you went out to a bar and sat down at the bar, and this happened, I write about it one time, but it happened more than once. You order beer, there's a guy next to you. The guy says, "What's your line of work?" It was always the first question. And then the second question, or the second exchange, was reliably, "Man, my dad used to beat the shit out of me." And it was, and
why would it always be like, why was it that the one too, like?
it just was, and it just surprised the hell out of me that I saw it often, and that
they offered that,
and that was kind of offered, and usually it was just it would come up and like in funny little ways, and it was often a joke, or it was often just kind of like, oh man, it was just kind of like a way. But I saw that conversation connect men out there more than any other conversation, more than talking about women, more than talking about music that you like, more than talking about like movies or nobody even talked about that shit. People barely even talked about their girlfriends or women or anything like that. It was what your fucking job is and that your dad whipped your ass. And
I love that part of your book, like where you really contrast the guy from Africa who called himself King Mufasa. It's just like pointing out that like no one's obsessed with pussy. They're all like fighting each other, like
Right. Well, it's like that funny thing of like a group of men are always like, "Well, suck my dick." "Yeah, why don't you pull your pants down, boy?" Like that's always
right.
That's how like guys in America, I guess, fucking joke about fucking each other all the time. And my buddy from Africa was like, "What's wrong with you guys? Like, why are you always talking about sucking each other's dicks?"
I mean, it's a good point.
It is. It's like a weird, it's a weird cultural thing. But so, yeah. And so going back to the father wound, as I wrote, so that was the first thing. And I started writing more about that and more about that. I started writing about people's lives, and it was pretty late in the process. I'd gotten an agent, and he was giving me feedback, and the feedback kept being well, what about you? And I really resisted the entire time that I wrote the book. I resisted turning it into a memoir. So
really?
I really did. I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted the focus to be on these guys and the focus to be on what was happening out there. And I didn't want it to be about my funny little crooked life, But the realization I had the first realization I had was that if I'm going to talk in personal terms about other people's lives and these things that they've told me, it would be dishonest of me.
Yeah, hypocritical.
It would be hypocritical. It would just be shitty.
Yeah.
Like,
Totally,
who am
I
I to talk about these people's lives if I don't have skin in the game?
Right.
You know, so that was a big step that kind of led me to do it more, to dive more into my own.
But then you did it. It's like, but you did it so fully and so poetically. Like, I just really am, as your friend, I'm proud of you. As an artist, I'm like humbled by the gracefulness with which you're able to do it. So, I mean, really, like, I'm clapping. I'm really, like, you really did a good job. And I'm, if it was your agent or whoever that pushed that, thank you for all of it.
Yeah. And, you know, the other thing I would say, it was the hardest part of the book for me to write. And I did end up weaving it all the way through because, it started to be like, okay, how to unpack it.
Hold on. So for the listeners also, just give a little synopsis of what it is, like your own experience of your giant Irish family and all that.
Yeah. I grew up with a big Irish, Irish Catholic American family and on a sort of piece of disused farmland in central Maryland. And my dad, you know, he was never diagnosed with anything because he never went to a doctor. but he was a rough dude and had real anger and impulse control, had a real hard time with the idea of anything not being about him, I would say. So that any kind of, everything was kind of through the lens of what have you done to me? Like, he was very much a victim. And he had grown up in a really hard situation, and his life is, which I delve into a bit too, as far as my understanding of his life and what kind of got him to a point where he was so fucking pissed off all the time. And that, you know, and then I ended up, I was very interested in joining the military when I was a younger kid, but I fell in love with theater when I was like 14 and found myself very, very torn between sort of those two different paths when I was a kid. And I ended up choosing theater and basically working in that world as much as I could, as trying to do acting gigs and write plays until like I still do it, but eventually kind of, I think my early 30s, things kind of caught up with me, you know, if you can't pay your bills, and I hurt my knee and all kinds of shit. So I ended up working an office job and being pretty far away from, or feeling like the creative life that I wanted was just something I didn't have full access to, I guess.
No, it's good. And you're getting, I mean, I do want to go back to the family part a little bit because it was so brave. And I just have like process questions about how you approached, because you do say in the book too that you got permission from your sisters to tell a lot of the more tricky stories about your family's history. So I'd like you to talk about that. Like, at what point did you realize you needed to both verify things? One of the things that hit me so hard was when you talk about how the memory of some of the more traumatic experiences, how elusive the memories are, and how you almost don't even believe that they really happened. And so confirming it by talking about it with your siblings was really a powerful thing, which I totally get. I mean, I feel that way about some things in my own childhood where it came up from reading your book, where I was like, yeah, it's hard for me. Sometimes it's like even my family has evolved so far from that point. It's hard to imagine that was the origination of all of us, but it was. Talk about that process of approaching your family and how it went.
Yeah, it was a process, and I'd say that, you know, one thing was that as I was kind of getting more, kind of more of a push from my agent and then my editor to take things in that direction, I just point blank asked my mom and my sister, and my mom was very generous, and she said, "Well, everybody has."
How'd you say it? What did you say? How do you approach your mom about like, Mom, I'd like to talk about our whole family history in a book I'm gonna sell.
Well, I just, I think she saw that I was struggling with it, and some of it had to do with in the process of. So I worked with my agent on getting the book in shape, and then we took it to editors, and sort of they had different takes on how they wanted the book to continue. And so some of it was in the process of like figuring out what publishing house to go to. I think that's correct. And I think my mom knew I was struggling with it because I'm a fucking private person. It's not, it's an odd thing that I've written this memoir in that way. Because this isn't shit that I just tell people. Yeah. And it's stuff that I've kept kind of wound tight within myself, or that I'm at least protective of, because it does involve my sister was sexually abused, and my brothers were physically abused, and there's just a lot of pain there, and you just have to be careful telling other people's fucking stories. Absolutely. But so I think my mom saw I was struggling with it, and I point blank said to her, I said, "Look, I'm getting pushed to put this in a more personal situation and to write more about the family." And she said, and she just said, "Well, everybody's got a screwed up family, so you may as well write about our screwed up family."
Which is true.
Yeah.
It's good advice. It's generous of her. I mean, it's really...
it was very, very generous of her. And, it's also easy to have that conversation and then the implications start to fucking set in a little later when you read it and you're like, oh, that's in there. Another thing that I would say is that while I was like really deeply kind of wrestling with it, I did, I had a revelation that was kind of like, look, everything is there. And this was actually, I did an ayahuasca ceremony, and I think it helped me process this. In that I was thinking a lot about that, and about seeing stuff, and about like sight in general. And there was like, the revelation was that, look, everything is there. So it can be there, and it can be in the dark. Or it can be there, and it can be in the light. And if it's in the fucking light, I'm less likely to trip over it, or to try to like make sure that other people don't see it. Like if it's just there in the room, then you're just like, well, that's there, Yeah. It's not anywhere else. And I think that in my own process of like trying to become a more healed person, shame is like one of the biggest fucking problems. Shame, when you're abused, when you live in a place where you witness abuse, you feel ashamed of it, and you learn not to tell people about it because you're a little kid and you go to school and everyone's busy about talking about, their favorite colors and you're wondering what you're going to come home to, and you feel alone in that way too, because it's not like your other students whose dads are knocking the walls out know who each other are and can sit down and talk to about it, because they're all scared and they feel alone too. So totally. And then when it came to the writing of it, I drafted a bunch of shit and I sent it to my brothers and sisters, and it was one of the hardest things I've done in my life. It was a very painful thing to open that back up for them, and it was a painful thing to wait around and find out what they were going to say, and if they were going to be fucking pissed, and if they were going to be, mad at me, or feel like they weren't presented in the light they want to be presented. And I don't, another thing is that,
how did it go? How did they react? I mean, what was their first reaction?
Incredibly, every one of my siblings was totally supportive, and the reactions were amazing. Never negative. They were just, if anything, they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember that." And then we'd have emails and phone conversations about, about stuff that added to the book. And now I have sections where I say, "Well, I remember it this way. My sister Megan remembers this. Matthew recalled this. I don't remember that." So it kind of gives a fuller picture. And it makes me feel less crazy, because all the shit that I write about did fucking happen.
Yeah.
And they were there and they witnessed it, and it's really served to make us closer, you know. It's made me closer with each of my siblings. And I would also just say that it's like when you grow up that way, it's really hard to have good relationships with people that you grew up with, because it's just very, very difficult because of the pain that's there.
Yeah.
And the way that each person within a family unit, and I guess I should explain that I have 2 brothers and I have 3 sisters. My eldest sister Shannon was killed in a car accident when she was 16.
Mm-hmm.
I was about 8 at the time.
Oh, that gutted me. I think that was like the really big cry.
Yeah.
For me.
I can't.
Your telling of that is really beautiful. I mean, rest in peace, Shannon. It was beautiful telling of it, but gut-wrenching part of the story for sure.
Yeah, I can't really reread that part.
Well, I mean, I love what you said about that it's in the room anyway, so it might as well be in the light. I mean, that's like, and it's so simple, right? The medicine is so simple, but it's so hard because, you are exposing, not just yourself and your family. And it's so great that you had the chance to, I mean, what a healing opportunity for everyone. Like, I just feel like this is sort of like the thing that could stop generational trauma, you know? Like, you just really put like a real kind of end to a lot of that pain. Yeah. And being like, that was then officially, and now, we have.
Right.
The line is in the sand. You're like, that is it.
Yeah. And I'm lucky that it seems to me that my siblings feel that way. You know, they're like, okay, cool. Like, let's just get it out there. And
that's the power of art. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing that, when you're in service to it and it's working right, it will transform you. You will have that healing. But if you're just chasing art to give you some healing, it won't give it to you. And it's very self-serving to make people watch it. You know, so it's like it is that process of like the best art transforms the creator and the audience both. It's like it emerges together, and it's beautiful witnessing that in what you've just created. It's really wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I want to talk about a little bit more of your process because. Just even like picking pseudonyms for friends, protecting the names of people, and how much you had to recreate from memory, and how much you had recorded in your journals, and like how you get back into that mindset of remembering those details, or if that is your process where you're always recording details along the way. Like, is that your journal writing process? By contrast, I would say for many years, I've been leaning into a way of writing my journals or morning pages, which I got from The Artist's Way, which is to think of it mostly as dumping the bullshit from my brain. So I don't often, it's like a lot of the imaginary conversations and stuff that gets stuck on a loop in my head is what I end up putting on paper so I can be available for other things, as opposed to sort of like keeping a diary of like recording the events of my life. I do a little bit of that, but it's a lot of me just about bitching and processing and stuff that I would never go back and read. So I guess I'm curious about what your process is and how you did all that.
Yeah, I'm a pretty like stop and start with the journals, but I've kept journals and diaries like for a while, since I was in maybe middle school or even, but definitely high school. And so when I was there in North Dakota, part of it was that I didn't have any friends, and any free time I had was just kind of by myself. So it gave me a lot of time to write. And what I find is that I write a little bit about what I think about stuff, but I don't use it in that way. What I find that's fascinating about is that I can pick up a journal from like when I was in high school, and I can read like, got tacos with so-and-so, drove in a car down to this place, that night went to this crazy party and met this person and that person. And what I find so surprising is that the memories come right back with just really kind of skeleton notes. And so when I was in North Dakota, I forget, I didn't intend to write. Like, I mean, I figured I'd write, but I think I wrote over 200 pages of sort of like just about what I was experiencing. There was one period where I didn't write for a while because things were so shitty. And I talk about that in the book, but so I was keeping pretty detailed notes, or at least notes of like certain details. Cause sometimes it is just like the way something smells, or you remember like a remark. And I would even, I realized that I shouldn't have like a notepad with me, but because everybody texts and spends all their time on their fucking phone now, it's really easy just to jot down something like something funny that somebody says and kind of and then have it. And, so, one of the weirdest things that I'd never thought about is like, so I was there 2000 until 2014, about this time of year. And then, the book's just coming out now. So it's like a very weird time to live inside. Like I basically spent 7 years of my life inside of 1 year of my life. And it's, and it's weird, so it's sort of like walking around all these memories in an incredibly detailed way. And, to do it.
I thought about that so much because I am so fixated. Like I have, it's really hard for me to sort of steep in stuff too long. Like I'm always like evolving the next thing and many things simultaneously. Like I sort of live in that emergent state mostly. So like I thought about that a lot with you about like what it would look like to sort of zoom in so closely on like just, one aspect. Say more about that. I mean, do you feel like you missed that you actually stopped living your actual life to do that?
I would have liked to, but I had to work too much like during the whole process. So, I feel like for one thing, another interesting thing that I would say is that time is a huge ingredient in every project. So sometimes having a short period of time is a great ingredient. In this case, having the length of time that I had really gave me the time to like dive deeper and deeper into my personal history, as we just talked about. And then also just to consider the implications of certain situations, so it's like, whether it's like going to a strip club or like being around people who are using racist language, or, being in a situation where I rented a room at a house and while I saw, a black couple denied the room next to me because of the color of their skin. And I still took the room because I needed a fucking place to stay. And kind of sitting in that feeling of regret, that feeling of moral failure, that feeling of like, well, what choice did I have? That feeling of like, well, that's an excuse I'm making. That feeling of like, what would my heroes have done? Like, what would the fucking my civil rights heroes would have done something fucking different? And so.
But maybe not in that moment.
And I mean, I find it now, it's a thing that I've experienced and it's something that I've looked at from a lot of different angles. And I think that because I've been able to write about it, it can be a valuable thing. Whatever side you land on, whether you think my behavior is justified or not justified. For me, it's like kind of like, well, I don't fucking know, and like, but it's given me the chance to that situation and other situations that I was in, like a chance to think about them as bigger things as opposed to just like, well, that's some shit that happened. And so I'm grateful for the time for that, for having that time. I would never, if my next book takes this long, it's like, shoot me in the fucking head. I mean, I was like working as a stagehand, and I was moving furniture, and I was doing construction work, and I was doing all kinds of, bartending, or doing like so many different jobs while I was trying to hold some fucking semblance of a life together while I was writing the book. So it seems like now I'm in a position where I should get if this goes well, I'll get an advance for the next one, and then I can won't have all that shit weighing on me, because I don't feel like that time was like particularly well spent. I feel like I feel like I could have done it in probably still 3 years, maybe 4 years or so, but I could have knocked a couple years off if I wasn't hauling furniture up steps.
So you got back. So you had the whole experience and went through waves of feeling like you were going to stay there forever and make it your whole life, to feeling like you were going to run off at any minute,
right?
To escaping finally with your life, and had a whole bunch of reintegration to society hiccups to deal with. So talk about that, like what it was like coming back from it, and also how you got an agent and how you got the book deal. How did that all happen?
I would say, I got back, and I don't know if it's like, I guess PTSD is like a diagnosis, but I guess that, the oil field work, one statistic that's, I think is pretty illuminating is that as many people, as many soldiers as were killed in Afghanistan from like 2000, and I don't remember the exact years, like 2003 to 2017, the same amount of people were killed in the oil field. Similar, very, very similar numbers. So there's the intensity of the danger of the work, coupled with the alone time. And
can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah.
Just like because that sense that you get of human life being so disposable is really a hard one to sit with. Like at the price, it's like, is the price of oil, worth it? It's just like, what are we doing? Can you just talk about that a little bit?
I guess what I can speak to is just kind of the nature of the work and the danger of it. There's, thankfully, I never witnessed any terrible accidents, but they happen a lot, and you hear about them a lot. And, you're basically like surrounded by heavy machinery, working 14-hour days. And as you mentioned at the beginning, in all kinds of different weather, from like 100 degrees in the summer when you've got a dark blue fire resistant jumpsuit on, to I think the coldest weather I worked in was negative 38 degrees, where people regularly are getting frostbite, and you can feel the, I think the passage I'm going to read is actually about that, but it's things like you can feel the liquid in your eyeballs freezing when it's that cold. Yeah. So it's just fucking dangerous. And on top of that, and people get really tired. I worked, I think the most hours I worked in 1 week was like 94 hours. And that was right after, usually they're around 70 hours, 70 to 80 hours. So it was like, kind
but
of
do
on
you
the
feel
heels
like,
of that.
because I was like, why can't they just work 8-hour days? Why can't they have more breaks? Why can't they just like train people? Like, I know that's just so naive, but it's like, is it really the sort of like relentless pursuit to make as much money as possible? Like, is that coming from the company? Like, why can't it be safer working conditions? Like, why can't it be a saner job?
I think that the economic system that we live in is just one that essentially is like it's sort of like feudal adjacent. I think that the issue with talking about capitalism and socialism is that if you're talking about it in terms of post-World War II, like we call that capitalism, a manufacturing society that was working with a strong union force is capitalism. what we have now, I just don't even think is that. And so I keep waiting for some fucking Harvard-educated, Yale-bred cunt to basically economist fucking dipshit to actually. I just don't know, like, what else do you call them? It's just like.
But we need them to see it. We need them to like be like, yeah, we see this. We need them to be thinking our way out of this too.
Exactly. What I mean? It's an incredible, and they're just cogs in this incredibly myopic system. So it's like everybody, all these economists that you see on TV, all go to the same fucking school. They all have the same fucking professors, and they're all taught the exact same thing. And I don't believe for a fucking second that they're any smarter than anybody that I fucking worked with in the oil field.
True.
And so the whole system is fucked. And as far as like why is it so dangerous in the oil field? It's like, why do people get why do their heads explode when gas is $3 a gallon? Like, are you
right?
Like,
I know, because it should be $10 a gallon.
You claim that and this is where I get into it with a lot of the predominant, what's I guess called liberal thinking. It's just like, what do you want? Like, you don't want it to be more expensive, but you don't think we should use it. So, like, what do you fucking think? And you want to be able to you want to be able to, like, basically have whatever you want, whenever you want it, at any fucking moment. And even if the idea of personal sacrifice is even brought into the table in the slightest way, if it is fucking hinted at. And I'm experiencing this with a New York Times article that I just wrote. It's just like, you get a bunch of fucking people who are like, you're wrong about that, and we need policy change. It's like, I know I'm ranting here, but fuck it. We do need policy change. But if you're not in the fucking government, I don't know why you're spending all your time reading fucking studies about policy change. We get to vote. I vote. This is my experience, is that I vote once every 2 years. It takes me a couple fucking hours to do it. And I love doing it.
Yep.
Sacred, beautiful, amazing, democracy, Thomas Jefferson, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's wonderful. But that's not what I do every single fucking day of my life. And I'm not, and if you're an activist, then God bless you. Fight the system. But if you're just the person who likes to say the words "fight the system," and votes and then complains about the fucking the climate change, then you're a fucking problem. And that's all there is to it. It's like, we need to do more with less, and we need to get back to figuring out what's important. And if what is important to you is drinking a fucking soda pop with this disposable plastic, then enjoy the fucking raised heat. Then enjoy it. You know what I mean? And then have fun. Magic and loss.
We are very similar, you and I, with sort of our outlooks on the world. We were steeped in the same Baltimore art soup.
Right.
We were coming of age, most importantly.
Right.
But because of how, and it's all ego. I mean, I see that so much, because it's like, people aren't willing to, like you're saying, have any inconvenience, and it's like, there's got to be some pain to learn. It's like, it's not always going to feel good, but when you get to the other side of it, it's a relief, and it's like you're saying, it's like it brings the thing into the room. It's like not it to me, like, because I go on these tirades too. I mean, get me started on any topic you like, because whether it's like child slave labor making our telephones in China, or it's like, which thing do you want to talk about? How we're turning a blind eye to, and then so it is completely hypocritical to get on any sort of like moral soapbox. And I believe pretty much what you prove in your book. It's like you with your heart showing up in this place and just giving it your all and working alongside people, it will change you. It makes a bigger difference, and it's like, and the things that you've learned and been able to bring back, and educate so many people about this whole world that, I didn't have any idea about.
Right.
So it's like, it's a beautiful gift. And I'm really grateful for it. But I mean, it's like, you're right. It's like your outrage is 110% justified, because it's like it's all ego and hypocrisy, and it's not going to get us there.
Right. And you know, I'd also would just say that I know I'm not doing the best job. Like I order stuff online, I order food delivery, you know, it's like, I get that too. But I think like mentioning basically slaves in China making all our junk, it's like, that's a real problem. And there's this kind of weird over-reliance in the discussion on data that I think is like, it's just like, if you look at the data, for global warming, for climate change, for instance, it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, it doesn't really matter what I do when you look at man-made climate change. And it's like, well, fucking, if you steal from your neighbor, it doesn't affect worldwide crime rates, really.
Right.
You know, like if you go if you go to the town square and jerk off, like, I don't know that that's like gonna, like, as far as sex offenders across the world, man, maybe it doesn't really add up that high. You know, so it's just like, it's just like an insane thing that has people feeling so hopeless. And it's not
they're not relying on personal experience. That's what, like we were talking about earlier. Like, it's your direct experience. Like, you went out there and directly experienced it.
Right. Yeah. And so it's just like, you know, you don't work at a soup kitchen to solve world hunger. You know, it's just, I don't know how many more examples I could give of that, but it's like, and also like, we're not expected like the conversation feels like it's this third rail that makes people very, very defensive because they don't want to be called hypocrites. And but until we start having that conversation, in a way that's kind of like with open-hearted, I just don't see it. I can say, look, you know, I got a composter. I think that's good. You know, like, that's a positive thing. Gardening is a positive thing. Planting stuff is positive. It also is good for our nervous systems, you know, so unlike what Netflix, doom scroll. Yeah. So, you know, so I don't know.
Yeah, and we're all learning, right? Like, collectively, we're learning. It's like we let it go too far. We can see now how it's playing out over time, and I really don't like it. And I'm really fighting because I feel like I'm fighting just to even have a little corner of the world where I can exist. You know, it's like where someone like me can even make sense, and I don't think that that's a hard ask, but it is right now.
It is super challenging, you know? And I'm not even, I mean, I've always enjoyed talking about politics with friends and, you know, like, but lately I've less and less enjoyed even the discussions around it. You know, it was like writing the Times article. So I wrote a piece in the Times. I don't even remember what it's called, but a big piece for the Sunday Times. We're
going to link it in the show notes. So this is a big thing that I did want to talk about. This is not just a little thing. This is a color page spread in the Sunday New York Times. God damn it. I'm really fucking proud of you. So that just came out today. I haven't actually seen it, but.
Yeah. And, you know, I guess I would say, I've been a little hesitant even to like want to get into the politics or those kind of discussions because people are so rigid in their thinking and they just get kind of mean about it. But I think that if there is one thing that I would try to put across, and I'm not sure how well of a job I did in this article, it's like you got to write the articles so quickly, and I am just like a slow writer, and I am a sleep on it person, and you know, and a lot of it had been written sort of in other forms, but I guess that's
all your Capricorn.
You know,
energy.
I just keep coming back to like what can I actually do, and I think that putting it as a cultural issue that we can all try to figure out makes more sense to me than more blaming or expecting politicians to do some kind of fucking magical thing. Right. You know, like I don't see, you could have 100 Democratic seats in Congress and it would still take time to implement any of these changes. So these big ticket, giant, act like completely economic transforming changes are just going to take a little bit of time. And I don't think it hurts to consider and to think about and to talk about our own consumption, you know, in the fucking meantime.
Yeah, and I feel like there's just this overwhelming guilt that's like behind it all. Like if people really let in the full weight of all the damage they've done, they'd be overwhelmed by it or something. But that's a very yes, like there might be that point where you just get cracked open by the enormity of it all. But then on the other side of that is kind of like the sense that's like, okay, well, the only thing I can control or have any influence over is like what's right in front of me. So what can I do to make this immediate community, this immediate situation better? Like how can, it's like it radiates out. So it's not like, and to your point about just like, it's not the choosing how to fight the battle, first of all, and which battle, it's like there's too much battling, and it's like everyone's taking everything at once, and then because it's too overwhelming to deal with that, they won't deal with any of it, and they sort of like drill down, they make certain things, but it's like you have to look at the whole. It's going to be a process, and it's going to take all the things shifting. Right. It's like it's going to be, and you're right, it's going to take time, but it will never happen in this culture of shame, like, and of just not being able to hold paradox. That's really I keep saying, like, I'm like, I want like a Gen X, like station, like what Oprah did, starting a whole network. Like I want that for us. 'Cause I'm like, I want to be able to have nuanced and complex discussions with people that understand reason and can appreciate actual differences. Right. Can hold actual space for people to be at different stages of their own awareness and journey and fight through their own things and let them be where they are. And that includes me, because I feel like, people aren't even letting me do that. And I'm like, I don't think that I'm a radical person. My art is really about sex and comedy at the heart of it. Like telling deep esoteric truths with sex and comedy. It seems pretty benign. I don't know. But
These are all jokes about fucking. How'd that turn weird? What's wrong with that?
But it has. It's like, and now it's like, I feel like we're living in this. This is what this energy has created. We're living in that world that this has created. Yeah. And it's like, shame is a magic killer. There's nothing you can do with shame. It's so hard to get out from under it. So when you shame and blame people, it's like you don't care actually about growth and change. Right. Yeah. Because you are absolutely cutting them off at the knees. Like it cannot happen. Yeah. Yeah. So if you actually care about change, it's like you have to just hold a lot more space for all the complexity and how it's a paradox, how each thing, and like you're saying about, even getting flack for having conservative friends. Right now, living in the country, I have more in common with the Republican Christian conservatives because I'm a very spiritual person. I have a sort of like larger sense of cycles of time and history and the sort of poetic nature of things. And, it's like we actually have a lot in common. Right. We don't talk about politics. Right. Right. But we talk about everything else from like how we love what we love and why we love it. It's like that's what you have in common with everyone. It's like find the things you love. Yeah. And which you did through music, even when you went there, which I thought was really great too. And lamenting the fact that there was none. And that to me was such an indicator, because I say this all the time on the podcast too, that I really believe, artists are like the tree frogs in the rainforest. You can tell the health of a society based on the art, the artists. And it's like it's been too hard. Like people do not understand what we do, how we are pushing the frontier. And it's like the amount of resistance that we have to fight through just to do that for the collective. And it's like, it's so hard. Yeah. It's extra hard. It's like a layer of extra difficulty that I really am starting to resent.
Yeah. I think that there's, a couple things. One is that I think that this obsession with data and with the science says, because I know that in, rarely turning on the TV to watch cable news, but just the constant polling for me is one example of having to, over the last 4 years, every time I read about politics, I'm told that I am a white male between a certain age
You're
group.
not allowed to have an opinion
Between
or
a certain
talk.
age group, and then I'm most likely going to vote for Donald Trump. And I just find it like so incredibly divisive, just the way that it's talked about. And it basically, if you're always just like the numbers say this and the numbers say that, you can't really talk about a discussion about it. And like fucking guzzling a bunch of climate change data is like not helping the environment. And it's good.
Well, it's like also it's like, you know what proves that doesn't work is quantum physics, right? It's like where it's like it says the results change based on who is looking.
Right. And that's why one of the
it's like that permeability and that's to me it's like part of the problem we're having and why I'm sort of navigating more towards spiritually minded folks right now. Is like that, is like people are believing materialism and science too much without actually letting in their own direct experience of how magical, weird, and complex the world is.
Right. Like science and data can be good tools, but they're also like
it's one lens.
It's one lens, and you're cutting out intuition, you're cutting out love, you're cutting out community, you're cutting out neighborliness, you're cutting out like all the stuff, like the stuff that to me is the stuff that I really tend to really value. And I think with as hyper politicized as everything is, it is difficult because it's just like, can we not talk about politics? Because who fucking cares? Like,
exactly.
And I find the similar thing that you're talking about that with like a lot of conservative folks, I can have a little bit more of a connection with, as long as we don't go to that kind of like third rail. But I have, a lot of my friends who are really politically progressive, I've known for years, but man, you get on the phone lately, and I think it's hopefully starting to change, but it's like Ben, just like every phone call is like a dumping of like angry political things. And it's like, you know what? We live in a representative democracy. I'm going to do my part on election day. And then if there's something, if there's something I really believe in, I'll march in the streets. I've marched in the streets of once. I've done activism, but like, okay. It doesn't mean every conversation, and a lot of art now is even just so political that it's just like, you just want the people to shut up. I don't,
no, it's like bludgeoning people. It's like, it's not, and it's using art as a weapon in my mind. It's like, and it's kind of like, it's created so much imbalance I think it's really stifling to artists right now. So again, it's like the fact that you were able to do this right now. I'm so proud of you.
Magic and loss. We gave all the magic, held on to the law. The magic we had, it fell from our sleeves. Out of our hats, it was hard.
Okay, we went off on a total tangent. I do want to hear about when you landed back on the East Coast, dealing with the PTSD, and when and how the book deal came about.
Oh yeah, this is a great story because I had, I did have like some friends. I'd lived in New York for a long time, and I had some friends in publishing and some connections. And I spent about 6 months after I think I had 150 pages written. I then spent probably 4 to 6 months writing a letter. So I just tried to write the best query letter that I could find, which is the letter that you sent to get an agent. And I made a list of about 50 or 60 different agents and color coded them, and was ready to email the people I knew who might be able to send these agents like a note or something, or might be able to put in a word for me. But there's one writer who is maybe my favorite, one of my favorite living writers is Sebastian Junger. So his agent was on the top of my list, and then was like a dream list, right? And then there's another guy named Bill Clegg who had written a book called Portrait of the Addict as a Young Man. And as well as another book, he has another book called 90 Days, and now he's written a couple fiction pieces. But Portrait of the Addict as a Young Man is a memoir about him going out on his own as a literary agent, he's starting his own business as he becomes completely addicted to crack cocaine. And he spends a summer like bouncing from hotel room to hotel room in New York City, smoking as much crack as he can based on how much money he can get out of the ATM. And completely, meanwhile, with like all his clients trying to hunt him down, his partner trying to hunt him down. He has like a fucking office, and I think he smokes like $70,000 worth of crack in that summer.
Wow.
So I had been really, liked his book.
Masochist.
And, I had looked him up and found out as I was researching agents that he had his own agency again. And I think it was less than a year old. And I just thought, this is the guy that I want. And I sent him so I just sent him an email one afternoon, totally cold. I sent him my letter. He was the first person, or maybe the second person after Sebastian Young, his agent, who I sent it to.
Amazing.
And he got back to me like within 2 hours. Yeah. And he just said, he said, great letter. Send me some pages. So I sent him the pages, and then about a month or two later, I got a note that was like, great pages. And he told me a little bit about what he liked about it, and then a little bit about, and then he was like, when you have more, send me more. So however many months later, I wrote a whole bunch more, sent them to him, and then he got back to me, and he's, a couple months after that, and he said, oh, these are great.
And so, like, this, you were, like, writing it for him, so you didn't, like, have a bunch of this even sort of in any shape yet.
Yeah, it was kind of in shape from the journals that I'd had in North Dakota, and I'd been working on it. So the first 300 pages I had worked on a bunch, and then everything after that was, took longer. So it was really like maybe 1.5, maybe 2 years before before he called me and said, this is good. I'm going to represent you. Yeah. So I was really just kind of like relying, and all the doubt, all the self-doubt of just like, does this guy even exist? Like, I'm just getting a fucking email back once in a while. Is this somebody's assistant? I don't even know what's going on. And I had a partner at the time who was really great, and she kind of helped me. Erin kind of helped me. Just be like, no, she's like, he's there. Just keep working on it and keep getting it back to him. He's obviously interested. And the thing that he told me when he, was that, and even then when he said, okay, I'll represent you, he then gave me a couple pages of notes and told me I needed to finish it, but from beginning to end. And what he said to me made sense. Was he was just like, look, nobody knows you. Nobody knows who you are. You've literally never been published anywhere. And, he said, but I think that this is a really good book. And I think that, people will be confused. He was kind of like, he will be confused that that the writing is this good, and that you're this guy they've never heard of. He was like, you need to finish the whole fucking thing, and we're going to give him the whole thing. And when we pitch it, we'll give them the whole thing, and we're going to make sure that there's nothing in it that makes them kind of be like, no. And so that's how it went. So, I was doing what...
That's really great. So he really, like, helped you, like, he really pushed you to... That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, to have a mentor like that, to really be, like, both navigating the system for you and knowing how to make the approach.
Yeah. And he was...
That's really important.
And he was really instrumental in me keeping the stuff about theater and acting in the book, which to me has become a really important part of it, But at the time I was...
It's amazing. Yeah. And I love that you're like, I don't know, it's like whether you're an artist or a redneck, you know what I mean? It's like you bridge these impossible worlds,
right.
that like, but they make total sense. And it's like, and I'm like, see, I told you so.
Yeah.
I'm like, it just works. It's for everybody. Art's for everybody.
Yeah. So that was great. And then so when on the week that he pitched it, he basically sent it to a bunch of different publishers, and we had like 5 different publishers were interested in it. And it was a really fun week of going around and meeting with them. And when we met with Viking, which is part of Penguin Random House, met with Paul Slovak and Andrea Schultz. It was one of the like most informal meetings. Like some of them were in these big conference rooms. And when I met with Paul, it was like in his tiny little office, which was just stuffed with like the books that Viking had put out. He handles their backlist. So it was like all Jack Kerouac stuff, William Burroughs,
Amazing.
John Steinbeck,
Oh my God.
Ken Kesey.
All your heroes anyway. It's like,
yeah, and he was telling me stories about working with Ken Kesey, and he and so it felt kind of like a no-brainer. He was also the first person to really asked me questions about the book, and sort of, I don't know, there's a gentleness to him that I really appreciate. I feel like, when I'm writing, it's like very easily macho, tough guy. And I felt in good hands with him, kind of checking some of my impulses in that way, and just making sure that that when it's in there for a reason, and that the sensitivity of the book is really, I think, what makes it work.
I love how much you weave in your artistic lineage.
Right.
It's really beautiful how you do it, so much through song, a lot through, and Woody Guthrie, who you have, a long career relationship with by virtue of writing a whole musical about his life and playing him on stage.
Right. Yeah.
And working with his estate to write it and all these things. Thank you for doing that. I feel my blood like warm, like hearing their names again and reading poems and, like the Bukowski poems.
Yeah.
And, it's just like, staying really connected to the greats and pulling them into it, into the storytelling. It puts it in context. It gives it like, I don't know. I can't describe it. It warmed my blood.
Yeah.
It really fed me. I liked it.
The process of that, I feel like, has been the most healing aspect of the project for me personally, and that in a lot of ways, I think weaving that stuff through, because I was kind of resistant to it. I was like, I was like devising ways to not explain the fact that I was a theater kid who plays folk music and who then became an oil field worker, because it just seemed like, I was like, it's just too much to unpack. But as I did it, it became a real process for me of weaving these disparate parts of my life together. Like you say, being an artist and a redneck, and being like, you know what, maybe there's not one word for what that is.
Yeah.
but like finding it within myself and weaving it together literally in the pages of the book, and also just in my own soul. It's sort of, in one way, I think the whole book can be read as a story of a person learning to accept that he's an artist.
Oh my God. Yeah. I just got chills. You totally said it, because it's like, I went through this period in my own journey where I was like, I'm using capital A artist now.
Yeah.
Like, I am an artist.
Right. Yeah.
And it's funny because it took this process of going through all these lengths and then writing the book about it. And this is the hero's journey. I mean, you live it. You are doing it.
Yeah.
It's like, and you are following your bliss the whole time. It's like you are a man after my own heart. So it's like, and the sacrifices that you've made, when you talk about the periods of, relative security and comfort financially that you're able to finally have, and being kind of not comfortable in your skin.
Right.
For the things you had to do for that. And, and that like this itch still has to be scratched somehow.
Yeah.
That you just kind of throw yourself back into it in sort of like high epic adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm living a version of that myself, and it's like, I think it is the way we do it. Let's take this opportunity actually to have you read a passage from the book. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit with us, that would be wonderful.
I'd love to. It's really fun. I just got copies of the actual book, so it's really fun to hold them in my hands now.
I can't wait to have it. I had to read it, a digital version, and I was like, and I knew, and you were recording the audio version. I was like, I would like either of those better. Yeah. I want the thing.
So this chapter is called Sundogs, and this is after I've been in North Dakota for a long period of time, and one of my best buddies, who's a coworker, is named Huck. It's called Sundogs. The horizon is all shades of white. Snow falls on a windy slant and holds tight to the prairie's dirt crust, sparkling and reflecting. Ice grapples a million glittering stalks of grass, rigidly waving and clinking against each other. The whole sky is a single cloud stretched thin. Huck and I leave the crane pickup and walk into the insanity of cold. The very air sparkles as the moisture in the atmosphere freezes before our eyes, in undulating, shimmering waves. Huck dances forward and points toward the sun, raising its cold white head in the east. The sun looks tall and pinched, not like an orb, but in the devilish shape of a goat's pupil. Circling the sun is a purely symmetrical crown of light. There they are, Huck says, the sundogs. In the ring of the halo, on the same eye level as the sun, an arm's length to the left and right of the goat's pupil, burn two mock suns, the fiery outstretched hands of an ancient winter god inviting praise. Pretty cool, huh? Says Huck. It is pretty cool, I say. It is negative 38 degrees in the Bakken. We get to work. The day smears past. The soft sound of snow rustling on snow, the tinkle of frozen stalks of prairie grass, generators and idling trucks, the rip of a wild wind through location peels the snow from the earth and sends it spiraling sideways through the machines, through the zippers of our work clothes. A flake of snow licking the neck feels like a cold fist. Chains rattle and gears shift. The sundogs move higher into the white, stretching into day. Huck appears, big and commanding. His normal awkwardness gone, his body poised and moving, legs, arms, and heads in perfect tandem with the crane. He's throwing he's throwing hooks, shortening chains, and racing after trucks. No words are spoken in the silent din. I watch him as he kneels next to me, his mask covering his face except for the pink around his eyes. Icicles extend his eyelashes, delicate, otherworldly, feminine, as his eyebrows fill with the ever-growing glacial amounts of ice. A flea's Antarctica. Huck rigs a piece of metal to the gin truck and disappears after it. I climb into the pickup to warm up. Pulling off my hood and mask, I feel the ice on my skin melting. Tiny rivulets of water run down my coat. Wet face, wet jacket, blowing into hands, rubbing eyes. The company radio buzzes with trash talk. Rubbing hands together, stomping feet, closing eyes and breathing deep. Don't pull off your boots and don't stay too long. Don't let the feet warm up. Get too warm and it only gets worse. If you let your feet sweat, the moisture freezes as soon as it's outside. Ice in your boot ain't just cold, it's mean, unrelenting, unforgiving, unshakable, cold as a burn, like an impact driver to the foot. So get out, but it's warm in the truck. But get out just a moment longer. No, get out. Back into the cold and moving into the white. Part of the machine, part of the snow, a son of the sundogs, swinging chains and rigging hooks, keeping legs moving, keeping arms moving, moving body across the hard earth, crunch of boots, crunch of metal where the black gold flows. I stop for a moment, just a moment. I close my eyes. It is a simple moment of rest as the crane idles by the substructure of the rig. I exhale through my mask, but when I try to reopen my eyes, I can't. My eyelashes are frozen shut, fused together by ice. My gloves are covered in invert and diesel. I can't touch them to my face. I pull off my right hand glove and my left hand. I pull off my right hand glove with my left hand. Immediately, all feeling leaves the exposed hand. I can't open or close it. It sits at the end of my arm, a useless piece of meat. I pawed my eyes to brush the ice off my eyelashes. My hand is awkward a tool as a man could wield. But it works. I can see again. I blink my eyes free. I look at my hand, a meaty red paw. Hurriedly, I attempt to put my glove back on, but it won't fit. I can't will my fingers to conform to the fingers of the glove. I try again, but I'm moving too fast. My fingers won't move. They won't slide into the glove. I slow my breath. I fight my panic, and I move deliberately, slowly fitting the glove around the foreign hand. I get it on and then bury my hand under my armpit to warm it. I hear a horn. The crane swings toward the north end of location. I move after it. At the end of the day, in the final bitter hour of strangled light, Huck and I rigged down the crane. We'd passed each other all day long, jumping onto each other's rigging when we could, throwing hooks and chains on each other's lifts, but never talking, just moving. On from rigging and back into the white, and then onto rigging in a silent dance of brothers. Well, you can go home tonight and know you are one of the toughest motherfuckers on the planet, Huck finally says to me. Ain't just anybody. Barely anybody on earth has worked a day like we just did. That's something to be proud of. We pile into the truck to drive home. Charlie is already running his mouth, fiddling with a satellite radio and popping open a Four Loko. Me in the driver's seat, backing up the truck, peeling out onto the road, preparing to be made fun of for my driving. Huck spreading out on the back seats, slipping a dollop of dip behind his lip. I knew then that it had been a special day, but it wasn't until several years later that I would remember it somehow as one of the best days of my life.
I love that. I thought about that chapter several times in the snowstorms the last couple weeks here.
Yeah.
I was like, well, it's not that cold.
Right. Yeah, it's one of the most kind of poetic chapters of the book. A lot of the writing isn't quite
so
that
visceral.
Yeah, but trying to get the feeling of being there and that sort of disjointed short sentences and just kind of flashes of images, I felt like was the best way to get it across.
Yeah. I mean, did you have the chapters all laid out? Like, did you know it was kind of going to, because it's very, kind of compartmentalized or thematic, you know? Did you start with that, or that came later?
I mean, that was, kind of the whole time I was trying to figure that out. You know, I've, probably, hundreds of pages of just, me writing out the chapters in the order I think they're supposed to go, and then...
Wow.
Moving them around and condensing chapters. And, it's pretty linear as far as the experience goes. It starts in the springtime and ends in the winter with a coda in the spring. But, yeah, getting the order right was very, very challenging. Yeah, it was a whole part of it.
So, okay, here's the big question.
Yeah.
Do you think that you can have art without suffering?
I don't think you can have life without suffering. So the answer is yes.
Good answer.
But I think, one of the things that my book is about is the joy of suffering, the joy of doing very, very difficult things. And I spend a little time, and maybe it's almost too much time. We went back and forth about how much I talk about it, but in the book, I talk a lot about the Mandan tribe who were in North Dakota and some of the practices that they use. They have this festival called the Ayahuasca Ceremony that happened every summer, and that involved some of it was sort of, there's a lot of fun in the festival, and there's all kinds of sex stuff and wild kind of pageantry. But there was a big part of it where the young men in the tribe mutilate their bodies. They stick spikes through their skin and hang themselves from the ceilings of their lodges until their skin rips off and they fall down. They allow the tip of their finger to be chopped off of their small finger, and there's a whole list of things that they go through. They don't eat or drink water for a couple days. Really, really brutal stuff. And Europeans tend to, there's a tendency to put that in the frame of a rite of passage. And there's a quote in the book from a native guy. It's sort of like in the research I did, it seemed like that was more or less just disproven. That was just kind of a way of looking at it. And it was there's a bigger idea that the suffering, that all we have is our bodies. And that, to offer our bodies to God is the thing that we can do, and that there's joy in that, and that's the only real thing that we have to give. So I found that to be really, really powerful, because the young guys in those tribes, it's not like they're like, now you're a man. They don't even, they're just like, no, you're one of the guys that did that. Other guys didn't do it, and so that's something that I find a lot of solace in, as far as like and it goes back to some of the reason the book is so personal. It's like, what do I have to offer? I have my body to offer, and I have the stuff that's in my brain that I can offer. And that's the biggest gift that I can offer to the gods, and that I can offer to the world. And just try to do it the best that I can.
You did it. I love it. It's interesting that, because you're talking about like initiation, and our culture in American culture is such a spiritual vacuum in many ways.
It is
that we're still all trying to understand. But I heard an interesting podcast. I'm obsessed with Carl Jung, so I listened to a couple different Jung podcasts, because I just like his use of. He elevates everything to like a mytho-poetic level, right? Where we're talking more about archetypes and types of experience across all human beings, So it's I just enjoy it. But they had a recent episode on This Jungian Life about female initiation and the lack of it, and how it's coming out in all of this what I call now toxic femininity, and on my worst days I call straight up fascist feminists, but that I've had a run-in with, because I've completely divested myself of using the word feminism even more, even though I was self-identified as a feminist for many years.
Right.
But I think that everything has its time and purpose, and that was useful then, and I don't want to live my life in reaction to anything anymore. So, what that looks like, is feeling around in the dark, because we don't have these traditions. And I think, as artists, like, we've sort of like made our own initiatory experiences,
right.
And life does it to you. Also, it's like if you're living life right, you're going to be destroyed a couple times, period.
Right.
And it's like, that is the work of life. No one gets out alive.
Yeah. And the difference, though, with like a cultural initiation is that it's something that brings you together. Right. And it's where the subtitle of my book is a memoir of brotherhood, a memoir of work, brotherhood, and transformation in an American boomtown. And the brotherhood thing, it's gendered in the title because it was mostly dudes who I was working with, but it's like it comes from having gone through something together. And that's why it's always used in sports. It's used in military conversations of like, okay, we all did this shit together. And I think that's what's, that without having
and we get that in theater, like doing a show together. Like you make lifelong friends. You're like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a real vacuum of that in our culture right now, where, Sebastian Junger, I've probably recommended this to you before, but the book Tribe that he wrote delves into that from a really interesting perspective and is really cool.
Yeah. You mentioned, I think, it in the book. I did actually make a note of that, so thanks for reminding me.
Right.
I'd love for you to just talk about the initial reaction that you're getting to your New York Times article.
Most of has been positive. I would definitely.
So it came out online on Friday, and it came out in print today.
Today, yeah. So it's been a few days of like getting the online reaction, and I did the thing they say everyone says not to do. It's like don't look at the comments, you know.
Oh God, yeah.
But I had a little bit of fun looking at the comments, and a lot of them were like, "This is great." So I was like, "Oh, that's cool."
Yeah.
But a lot of the reaction, there's a sentence towards the end of the piece where I say, which it's almost like a throwaway line, but or it was to me, which is that I make the observation that I think I say it seems to me that in general my country friends live much less carbon-intensive lives than my liberal city friends. And people seem to, and there's been a lot of the reaction is like, you know, it doesn't have anything to sort of do with what to me is like the main parts of the article, which are here's the history of oil, here's how intrinsic it is in our lives, and also what I obviously state is support for Biden's very progressive climate change policy, and where I go in depth to work to basically debunk the idea that it will lead to job loss. That's what the article is about. In the third section of the article, I get to the kind of like what can we do as people, and I make that distinction. But I thought in writing it that by me saying that I've mostly lived in cities, I now live in Lexington, Kentucky, which is a liberal city. I think that maybe people in New York don't have the best understanding of that. But Kentucky, fucking rednecks. But it's led to a lot of people kind of taking issue with this, and then me getting a lot of, and it's another instance of like, well, look at the science refutes that, and so, but the science doesn't. So it's like if you look at oil, if you look at where CO2 is produced, as in you look at where the big industries are, like obviously a town with an oil rig is going to have a very high carbon imprint, but if you look at consumption, and if you look at carbon CO2 through that lens, you find that it is much more consumption is happening in the cities, whether people walk to work or ride bikes instead of drive trucks or live in smaller apartments that don't take as much heat. They're still, in general, using a lot more fucking oil. And I had intended it, I would say, as a unifier, as a like I know who the audience of the fucking New York Times is. It's not going to be conservative guys who work in the oil field. So I wanted to basically kind of basically say, here's a thing that we can learn, that maybe we can learn from these more conservative, more rural folks. And I use the words in general because I meant it in general.
Right.
But there's been a lot of fixation on that. A lot of people seem to be kind of threatened by it. And I mean, I let it get under my skin a little bit. So I feel like, which maybe I don't need to do. And maybe that's some of my defensiveness, but I guess it's like, once you put something in the world, you never know the one thing, like, who knows what sentence any reviewer might pull from my fucking 400-page book and decide to use that to kind of talk about the book. So I guess I'm learning that as well. And then just, but the unkindness, it's just a funny thing. But I'd intended that little section as a connector, and it seems to have been like the most divisive part of the piece.
That's good, though. I mean, I think it might be hard to hear for people,
right?
But they need to hear it.
Yeah.
I mean, especially I even when I look at my own patterns and my own consumption now that I live in the country and not in a city, and I have to go and collect my water for my studio. So I go to a spring. It's like I know I conserve my water.
And when it comes, and when it comes down to it, it's like, what's the big fucking deal? Like, we're just so used to this convenience shit. Like, collecting your own water makes you, I'm sure you value that water.
I really do. Every drop. And I have to drain it out of a bucket. Like, I have a little sink with a 5-gallon bucket that I collected in. So it's like, I'm understanding all these complex systems. And as I'm renovating this RV and, literally like many days I'm digging a hole to poop in. Like, it's like, I'm like really like, I'm seeing like how all the systems work and how simple it can be. And also the absolute joy and pleasure in it. And that I get sort of a different quality experience too when I'm more actively involved in it.
Right.
It's like I'm living a completely different way, and I'm really enjoying it. And every day is kind of a weird new discovery,
Right. Yeah. And I feel like maybe it's just because sort of Republicans or conservatism have like they've taken the words personal responsibility to such like to mean no, like that's it. I mean, like you're on your own, personal responsibility. And it's like, I think that we can take...
That's one part of it.
I think that as progressives, we need to take that term back and be like, within the context of the greater systems, we can take personal responsibility to do our best job, which it's one of those funny things with writing this article is seeing how, I guess people skim it and they kind of like, I can totally feel with some reactions, like when someone it just reminds them of other articles. And so they're kind of upset about these other articles. But one thing that is like, it's hard to get over is this idea that there's too much writing in the New York Times about people in the middle of the country. It's like, that is like the funniest shit I've ever heard in my life.
But I was so guilty of it. When I lived in New York, it was like about 10 years. And it was like I literally thought that like only the crust of the country really mattered.
Right.
I was like the outer perimeter where the cities were, where the culture seemed to be happening, where, that was complete. It was such a myopic thing. And it must be New York because it's like you really just think like the whole universe, because kind of it is a whole universe,
Right,
but,
it is, yeah.
That's the great thing about it too. But when I left there, I was like, oh yeah, like, I really thought when I had left for 6 months and then I had to go back to get my stuff out of storage. And when I went back, I was like, I think I had Stockholm syndrome when I lived here. Like I just fell in love with my captor, and I forgot that like the captor was great. I loved being captive in New York. It was super fun, But like it was like it captured like a whole way of thinking that made me accept a lot of untrue thing. Like honestly, like one of the biggest things I felt like I accepted was just like absolutely abysmal living conditions as the norm.
Right. Yeah, no, it's totally true.
And then you go to the rest of the country and you're like, holy shit, you're living like kings and queens. Like you have a washer and dryer. You can park your car in a driveway. Like, what are you talking about?
And it's funny that people who are like, you're obviously an oil and gas company show and this sort of stuff. And also it's like, I love New York, man. It's one of my favorite places. I lived there. I guess I've lived in Baltimore a little bit longer, but I love it's like it's a funny thing. But the idea that like it's like getting messages is just like, oh, like I can't believe all these stories about Trump voters. And I feel like there's an issue with the quality of journalism about people in the middle of the country, because if you're a journalist and you fly out there for a week, and I guess we touched on this a little bit earlier, you're just not going to get to the heart of it. You're not in the community. You're not trusted like a community member. Folks in North Dakota are not like folks in fucking New York. You go to New York and sit down next to somebody in a bar, they're going to tell you their life story. You know what I mean? Or just nobody cares. This is where I work. This is where I live. It's like, it's a much more open kind of thing that people in the Norwegian homesteaders that settle North Dakota, it's like they ain't gonna open up to you, not over one, chicken fried steak at the diner. Like, trust me. So, but the idea that there's too many attempts at that kind of a story is pretty funny.
I know. So I'm assuming you're going to be really busy. Like, I'm really excited that you made time for this early in your interview process about the book, because I want to get to you first, and so that's exciting for me. And I'm like really just like gushing with pride about you. I've been telling everyone about your book, and I'm going to buy it for my boss who owns the marijuana ranch.
Awesome.
I'm really yeah, I'm just really excited. But you have so much more excitement because before that, and I'm really honored to also be putting the finishing touches on a music video that I made for one of the songs on a beautiful album that you released last year.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about that and
Yeah.
also about like what's coming up for you?
That record, so there's a record, it's called The Great Away. And like the title of my book, I perform musically as the good hand. It's like the name of my band, which is me and sort of whoever I play with. I play a good bit with Susan Alcorn, who's an incredible pedal steel player. But it's a rotating group of people, and put out a record, I guess, last fall. Yeah, I guess I'd just say, I write a lot in the book about music, and music, I would say, is just a huge part of my life. It's kind of like a river that runs through my life. And it's more, it's like a way of, I just find it to be a way of being as much as, like an attempt to write pop hits. And that song that you chose, Magic and Loss, is one of my favorites on the record. I think it ends the record. And, but yeah, it's just a special song, and you made a beautiful video for it. So I'm excited.
Yeah, so
to have
that was really special for me because you, like when I was, walking dogs in LA after my whole canceling and completely lost and in my own PTSD, ocean. Like you had mentioned it to me. You were like, I love all the dog videos. Do you think you could because I was documenting a lot of my time with the dogs that I walked, and you wanted me to make a video for it just on my phone. And it was, I wanted to really badly, but I quickly realized how hard it is to work with animals and that I needed, it was like, I wasn't getting the footage that I wanted. And I kept practicing and I was trying, but like, it was like, and part of my job was using an app where I had to take photos of them. So I knew really about how to get pictures of them, but it was very hard. So I was like, it just kept getting put off. And then I actually got a different job for a little while. And so when COVID hit and shit hit the fan and my life fell apart and I was like, I'm getting out of Dodge. I was like, my one last little bit of business I had to do was make this video for you. And it was so great to be able to go back and visit all my dog friends and say goodbye before I left LA. It was like really a very important process for me, and all COVID related too. So I'm really glad I was able to do it, and I'm really excited to get that finished for you and contribute to the album. And I want to make more music videos with you, and I want you to be in my movies and do all the things.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I love the video. It's super fun. I'm really excited about putting that out.
Great. So how do people find you? How do they stay in touch?
Thegoodhand.org is my website, and there's a contact information on there, and I pretty much get back to everybody who'd like a response. So I do love. It's really cool it's been really cool to hear from people, and the occasional weirdo, but it's been really cool to get notes in the set of communication. I met like a cool community college teacher in Colorado, and just some interesting people. An ex-rabbi reached out to me, and and that's been cool. So it's been great. And then and on top of the book, I'm mostly, I guess, gonna be chilling the book as much as I can and trying to get the word out there and get people to pick it up. And then but I also have music that I recorded for the audiobook. And I'm figuring out now, there's like 7 new songs that I have. That I'm figuring out now how to put that out, if I can't find a partnership with a music label or if I'm just going to do it myself. But all that information will be out on the website. And then I'm doing some other writing in support of the book also. So just trying to keep working.
When does the audiobook come out?
Same day as the print book, February 16th.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great, because you have the best gravelly voice too. I really want to hear you.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the audiobook because I use the pieces of the songs to score the audiobook, so it has like themes in it.
Amazing. And
underneath some of the text, there'll be a banjo part or an acoustic guitar or a fiddle, and that was really important to me. I think it'll sound more like a podcast or like a radio play is my goal. And there's a lot of cues, so I'm super stoked on that.
Oh, I'm so psyched.
Yeah.
Well, to send our listeners out, would you play a little something for us?
I would love to. And I'll just say that this is a folk song. I consider myself a folk singer, which has a very specific meaning that I explore in the pages of the book. And this is just a tune that I love and I've been playing a lot. I long to see you away, you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to see you away. We're bound away across the wide Missouri. Your daughter away, you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I love your daughter away. We're bound away across the wide Missouri. I long to see you away, you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to see you away. We're bound away across the wide Missouri.
Oh,
I
love you.
The prettiest goddamn song.
You just made me cry so much. This whole book, everything has cracked me open.
Yeah.
So I, of all my friends, I really wish you all the success, and I am so proud of you, and I'm so honored to consider myself an artist alongside you. So thank you for all your work.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on. This has been a lot of fun, and it's nice to be able to talk about the book and the writing and the process and this kind of like creative in a way that, just like the way that you do, I guess.
Oh, the dogs are
and your dogs
cueing us out of here.
It's a nice fade out. Canine fade out.
All right, people, go buy that book in every form. I'm clapping. We're clapping and barking and hollering and. All right. Later, alligators.
Thank you all so much for listening, and thank you to Mike for taking time to talk with me when he's got so many other reporters knocking on his door for interviews. I'm really grateful that we got to squeeze this in on the early end of all of your success, which I truly can't wait to witness. You can order Michael Patrick Flanagan Smith's new book at all the places and learn about it at thegoodhand.org. You can also check out his new album, The Great Away, which is also under the name The Good Hand. I made a music video, which is coming out soon, for the song Magic and Loss, which is on that album and has been playing throughout this episode. Thank you to my co-producer, Burgundy Bricks, a multi-level genius, who you will hear more from in our next episode. Thanks to the wonderful Wizard Fred, Viva la Renaissance sound designer and composer of our new theme song, Frederick Lewis, who wrote and performed for us. Can you believe how great that song is? Round of applause. Thank you, Fred. He's fucking speaking French to y'all. You better enjoy it. Okay, until next time, you can find me on vivalarenaissance.net. You can write to me. Let me know how much you love the book, love this interview, share it all around. You know I appreciate it. And in the meantime, make sure you keep having fun and keep it weird. It's more fun that way. Ciao.